come up with them. Or if you want to go through your presentation and we can put them in the chat afterwards, what would you like?
I'd prefer to do it afterwards, just
Sure.
just for a little personal organization and also lack of familiarity with the program. Does Google Meet have like a hand raise function the way Zoom does? Like, what should I be looking for when somebody has a question? Oh my gosh, Philip Matthew has a question. Okay, I see it now. Thank you.
There you go.
Okay.
Learning together.
So yeah, put your questions in the chat or just hold off to the end. So I'm going to start presenting. Are you okay to rock and roll, Kelly?
Absolutely.
Okay. Let's go. Okay, everybody see it? No, I think I stopped sharing my screen. Let's do that one. And I think it's going over to this one. There's that. Okay, and show my screen. Whoa, what is all of that?
I think you may have shared the video call itself.
Suzanne, I have it pulled up and I'm happy to share it if
Yeah, I emailed it around to you guys, so hoping that like somebody would be able to pull it up more effectively than I can.
Let me see.
Again, I apologize. I've never used Google Meet before.
Okay.
New one for me too. Oh, that looks familiar there, Jane.
All right.
Thank you, Jane.
I'm not sure how to make it bigger on the screen. Oh, there we go. All right.
It looks full size on our screens too.
Perfect. Okay.
And if it's a little small for you too, they're in the bottom right corner. You can click enter full screen, and that will make it even bigger for everyone else at home.
Awesome. All right. Great. Let's get started. Sorry, Kelly. Thanks for your patience.
Thank you all for your patience. Tech hiccups on a Tuesday night is probably not what anybody especially wanted to do on this call. I'm going to try not to get too mesmerized by the weird font changes that will have happened in this presentation. Who knows what happens when we turn things into PDFs. Yeah, so my name is Kelly Corbin, and I am definitely much more of a nature, garden, wildlife person than I am a tech person. That's probably pretty obvious by now. And I run a small business called Living Landscapes Maine here in my home office in South Portland. And I do not come from a gardening background. My mother is a gardener. I didn't have a ton of interest in it growing up. I don't come from a horticulture background, and I don't come from a design background. I actually come from an educational background, and specifically science and ecology of science. And that is really what interests me about this work, is helping people create gardens that aren't just pretty, but also really serve a purpose in life and in this world. And because I think it's just very impressive that we can just go into our backyards and actually support all kinds of different critters right where we are. I think sometimes being an environmentalist can feel like we have to do like really big things, like we have to buy solar panels, or we have to stop doing things, like we have to stop eating meat or stop flying. But gardening is something that we all have some ability to do in some way, shape, or form. And it's really just about adding more good back into the world. So tonight, what I'm going to talk about is how to create habitat in your garden, specifically through maintenance strategies in the fall season. I feel like native plants are totally having a moment. Like pollinator gardens are cool. That's amazing. But we also need to think about how we're taking care of those plants in our garden, in addition to what we're putting in that garden. All right, next slide. So in this talk, which now has weird font options that I'm not worrying about in this moment, so we'll cover like how we garden matters, the fact that these maintenance strategies have just as much significance as the plants themselves. And the two big ones we're going to cover are leaving the leaves, and I'm also going to talk about avoiding cutting plants back at this time of year. So basically what happens this time of year in terms of ecological gardening, which is the term that I prefer to use, is that you just get to be a little bit lazier. And that's awesome, right? Like you have science at your back telling you that it is okay to be a little bit lazier in your garden. All your neighbors are going to be rushing around, filling up those bags of leaves, and you get to kick back and know that you have scientifically justified just having another cup of coffee and taking it easy on a Saturday morning. So we're leaving the leaves, we're avoiding cutting plants back. And then we get winter landscapes that look like this picture on the left-hand side of your screen there. This was taken at the Children's Garden, which is in Cape Elizabeth at Fort Williams. And I highly recommend a trip there, even in the winter time, because it is just as beautiful, it is just as interesting, and is just as much habitat as it is at any other time of the year. That really striking red shrub in the foreground there, that is a native shrub called red twig dogwood. It offers great habitat in terms of berries for birds as they're beginning their migration. And it's also a host plant where a lot of different moths and butterflies and other species actually need to lay their eggs in the winter and in the spring. All right, next slide. So how we maintain our gardens matters. Our habitat gardens really need to support pollinators in all of their life stages. So all this talk about native plants tends to get really focused on flowers when they're in bloom. So we're talking about things that are happening in May, in June, in July, and August, maybe into September, October, but we're really talking about the warm months. And it gets really focused on the adult insects, right? The things with wings that are flying around and we can see very easily, bumblebees and butterflies and things like that. But in order to really provide habitat in our gardens, we need to think about what those insects are doing and what they need throughout their entire life cycles. When they're an egg, when they're a larva, as well as when they're an adult. And that's really a critical thing to think about in the fall, because it's such an important time for birds and insects as they're preparing for their various winter survival strategies. With birds, it's kind of obvious, right? Like birds pick up and go south, option A. Or option B, they stick around and try and make it through the winter time. So this plant that's on the left, this is one of our native viburnums. This is called withrod or wild raisin. In addition to having really cool fall color, it also has these berries. And there are some birds that are eating these berries right now. They're ripe, they're ready to go. But most of the birds that come along to eat these berries are going to wait until like February or March. What I see happen with this plant is that sometimes in March, a flock of robins is going to come along and they're going to clean the whole thing off. So if I had decided to get all like neat and tidy in the fall, then those robins wouldn't necessarily have something to come back and eat in like the depths of winter. All right, next slide. But before we get to all that stuff, I just always have to throw in this like PSA at this time of the year. And just as a helpful reminder or bit of information, goldenrod is not causing your allergies, or my allergies for that matter, which are very present and real to me these days. We have a ton of goldenrods in Maine, a lot of different species that live in lots of different kinds of habitats. I have 4 different species growing in my yard, 2 of which I planted on purpose, 2 that just showed up and, you know, they're fine. I love having them around. And they're super beautiful this time of year, but they often get demonized for causing people's allergies. And I've had to stop any number of clients from ripping out their goldenrod because they think it's causing their allergies. So that lovely goldenrod on the top picture, that is not the culprit. It is ragweed, the picture on the bottom. We know that goldenrod pollen can't be the cause of your allergies because it's evolved to have its pollen distributed by bees. It's heavy, sticky pollen. It has to be given a ride by an insect to get to another plant. So therefore, it cannot end up your nose. Just can't do it, not possible. The ragweed, on the other hand, super light pollen, it's spreading on the wind. That's what ends up in your sinuses. So get to know the ragweed, get to identify that. If you're looking for something to pull out of your yard, still give it a beat because ragweed is actually a native plant. There's something out there that needs to use that plant to survive, but that's actually the culprit. Goldenrod gets a free pass here because it's such an important late stage foraging source for so many of our pollinating insects. All right, next slide, back to our regularly scheduled program. So we're gonna leave the leaves. And I want to acknowledge too that if you have been a gardener for a long time, some of the strategies I'm going to recommend can feel kind of challenging because they feel completely opposite from everything that you have ever been taught. They also might be completely opposite from everything your neighbors are doing. And this is one of the challenges around ecological gardening, is that it often looks pretty different than what other people on your street are doing. I live in the suburbs. I cannot sit here and tell you that I have fully convinced all of my neighbors to adopt these strategies with me. But I do hope that by providing a model for people to see, it helps provide a little like safety and security and permission for other people to do the same thing. We are a very social species, right? We're constantly looking around to see like, am I fitting in? Am I doing the right thing? What are other people doing? And we're this very visual species too. We're looking for those visual clues. So our front yard is often this sign of like, yeah, I'm raking, I'm participating, I'm a good citizen. But we need to change that messaging so that leaving the leaves is what means you're doing it right and you're doing a good citizen. Because leaving the leaves is super important from an ecological point of view. First of all, it's going to allow nutrients to return to the soil. This is like ecology's grand plan. Ecology is ultimately about recycling. So the nutrients that were pulled out of the soil by the tree, by other plants, and turned into leaves now drops back down onto that soil to decompose and put the nutrients back in the soil. And again and again and again and again, over and over and over, right? So in order to have healthy soil, we need that layer of leaves to remain where it is, to decompose and to return those nutrients. Leaves also do a really good job of protecting the soil itself. If you think back to that rainstorm we had a few nights ago, that was really, at least in South Portland, that was a very, very heavy rainstorm, really, really intense. If you think about how hard all of those raindrops are hitting the ground, if it's just bare soil and there's that much force coming down, it's easy for the soil to erode, to just wash away. But if there's a protective layer of leaves on top of that soil, it breaks up that impact. It prevents that soil from being eroded away, from being carried off. The leaves also offer a layer of protection in terms of insulation, and that insulation is serving both plants. It helps keep the roots a little bit warmer over the winter time, and it also works as insulation for insects as well. So just a quick note about insects. I'm going to use this word insect for starters as though it covers things like spiders as well, and even though we know that's not quite technologically accurate, we're going to let it go. But I want to acknowledge that this is a huge group of organisms that we're talking about. In the state of Maine, we have around 300 different species of bees. We have around 120 different species of butterflies, and we have around 1,000 different types of moths. Moths are like a real power player when it comes to ecology. There's so many different things that eat moths. So because there's such a diversity of species, there's a real diversity of survival strategies when it comes to the wintertime. So some things are going to stay up in a tree. Some things are going to be below ground. Some things are going to be in a stem. The strategies that I'm going to recommend they're really like these sort of big, broad strategies, and that's going to allow us to serve the widest diversity of insect. So instead of us having to get to know every single one of those 290 different species of bees and exactly what they need to survive, we can just take these kind of big picture steps and know that we're like covering all of our bases, that we're really going to support them. So our best practice in this situation is leaving those leaves where they fall as much as possible, okay? And again, I know this is pretty different. So my second best option for you is to rake things into your garden or into mulch piles. Now, the best practice truly is best, right? Leaving things where they are is absolutely ideal. If we start raking them away, we don't know what we're going to uncover. We don't know what we're going to lose in that process. And when I say mulch pile, like that, I probably should have worded that differently. Think like a mulch layer, like 6 inches is about as deep as we would want to get. If you're thinking like giant leaf pile that you used to jump into when you were a little kid before ticks were really like a huge issue in our lives, those piles are so deep that the insects actually kind of like can't find their way back out in the springtime. So we just want that naturally occurring layer exactly where the tree put them. It did it on purpose. So we're just going to support that purpose and leave the leaves where they are. Second best, if you can rake them into your gardens, that's okay too. What I would challenge people to do would be to find places in your yard where you can do this as best practice. Totally fine, just leave it, see what happens, leave it alone. And then maybe pick and choose some other parts of your yard. Maybe there's like a front yard garden or something like that. And that's where you decide to rake and keep things a little bit tidier. That can be sort of a nice way to compromise around this. And then next slide, and let's see, who exactly are we supporting on this with this leaf litter? Leaf litter is also like a terrible term that ecology uses all the time. Like the leaves that are down on the ground, we call them leaf litter. This is terrible marketing. We should really find a better way of referring to them that doesn't just automatically imply we should throw them away, which is what we generally do with litter. But all right, so some species in Maine that are benefiting from this layer of leaves. We have fritillary butterflies. There's actually a small handful of species, I think like 4 or 5 different kinds in Maine. And these lay eggs on those dead leaves, directly on the dead leaves. Now the larvae are gonna hatch out from there, and the larvae are actually gonna overwinter in the leaf litter itself. And then in the springtime, they're gonna go start crawling around in search of their host plant. For fritillary butterflies, this is violets. So if you've ever looked at the violets in your yard and thought, oh, I should pull those weeds, now you don't have to do that either, right? You just get to be lazier and lazier here through the magic of ecological gardening. Leave the leaves, leave the violets, get some fritillary butterflies. It's a pretty good trade-off. Bumblebee queens, all species of bumblebee queens are going to spend their winter underground in the soil. And that leaf litter, again, adds that extra layer of warmth, of insulation to them. And then when they emerge into spring, they can get out into that leaf litter. Again, it's a little warmer, it's a little more protected for them before they go fly off and start making, start reproducing and living their adult lives. Woolly bear caterpillars, one of the insects probably all of us can identify easily and by name. Woolly bear caterpillars are the larval stage of Isabella tiger moths. So here's another moth, and they overwinter in that leaf litter. They need to be in there to stay warm and to survive. And also fireflies. You have an emotional childhood memory attachment of any insect, it's probably this, right? It's probably some sort of like deep memory of watching fireflies out in your backyard in the summertime. One of the main reasons we have fewer fireflies these days is because we've all gotten so caught up in raking the leaves and carting them off to the landfill. Fireflies absolutely have to spend their larval stages in the leaf litter or in soil. So leaving the leaves also means we get to have a lot more fireflies. In terms of numbers, there was a study that came out back in the spring. I think the researcher's name, it's like Max Furlotto. I'm probably not pronouncing that correct. He did a study down in Maryland, and they basically analyzed a bunch of 1 meter square plots. And in some plots, they left the leaves, they left them for a full year. And in some plots, they removed all of them. And then they came back in the spring and they counted the number of insects that emerged from each. On average, 1 meter square plot of land in like suburban Maryland, right? We're not talking like nature preserve somewhere in the wilderness. 1 meter square, suburban Maryland, around 18,000 individual insects would emerge from the leaf litter of just that 1 square meter. The part that, the plots that had the leaves all removed, it was around half that. So insects declined 50% on average when all of those leaves were raked away. And again, lots of different kinds of species, we're including spiders and all sorts of other critters into that. But on average, it was around a 50% reduction anytime the leaves got removed off of that plot of land. All right, next slide. Okay. So another one that when I do in-person presentations, especially to like garden clubs and folks who really have been gardening for a long time, this one I can just sort of like feel that the audience is starting to like, I'm starting to lose them a little bit with this one because it, again, just so different than what many gardeners have been taught. But to the extent possible, avoid cutting back perennials and grasses at this time of year. Leave it all standing. So first and foremost, we have birds, and the birds that stick around through the winter time are going to be looking for seeds to eat. And these plants, like all those beautiful winter plants on the right-hand side, those are bird feeders, right? In their own way, shape, and form, those are truly bird feeders. Those are the kinds of seeds that they're looking for. Sometimes birds will continue to use those materials for nesting purposes through the winter and into the spring, if they can find it from these plants that have been left standing. We also have a lot of insects that spend the winter inside plant stems. So down below the ground in the leaf litter, that's one option, but inside the vertical stems is another one. So a lot of different kinds of bees and other small insects will actually drill down into the stems themselves. They'll excavate a little hole and they'll lay their eggs directly into those stems, or they'll overwinter there themselves as adults. The other point that I really like to make about leaving things standing in the wintertime is that it's honestly just visually far more interesting, right? I'd rather look at this landscape all winter long than something that's just been cut down to the ground and then is just like waiting to become something again in April or May. There's a lot going on in this photo. There are so many different colors and there are so many different textures and shapes and species and all manner of stuff. And it's just, yeah, I would rather look at this all winter. It's going to move. It's going to do something. It's going to attract birds. There's another ecological landscape designer out of the Midwest that I'd like to follow. And if you're on social media, I would strongly recommend looking for Prairie Up if you're interested in this kind of work. He has a lot of really interesting information to share. He lives in like the most cookie cutter suburban neighborhood in Nebraska that you could ever hope to see, but his yard is like totally wild. And in the context of this like perfectly manicured neighborhood, it is really quite stunning to look at. But one of the things that I love that he says all the time, his name is Benjamin Vogt, V-O-G-T, by the way. One of the things he really likes to say about things like this is that brown is a color. We all, as designers, we always get clients who are like, more color in my yard. I want more color, color, color. Well, there's a lot of it, actually. It's subtle, right? But when you really start paying attention, there's a lot happening in that photo. So we can benefit insects, we can benefit wildlife, but we also get this visual interest for ourselves. It's a win-win. So the best practice here, leaving them all standing, let them just decompose on their own. Nature knows how to do that. Those plants don't need us to cut them back in the wintertime. That's a human invention, just trying to get things to be, according to our ideas of neatness and tidiness and control. But the plants are totally fine if we just leave them standing. The second best option, if that piece of advice is like, oh no, I can't do that in this part of my yard, or, for whatever reason, if this is feeling like not the right path for you, then on the next slide, I'm going to show you a strategy developed by a woman named Heather Holmes. So we can move to that next slide. Heather Holmes is an entomologist. She focuses on native plant and insect interactions. So she does know about what every individual species of bee needs in order to survive the wintertime. And she put together this graphic. This is usually organized vertically, but that wasn't really working out. So it's a little bit harder to read side by side, but let's go through it. So in that upper left-hand corner is winter. So here's where we're starting in this graphic. And in the winter, we leave those dead flower stalks standing and intact. Moving down into spring, she says that we can cut back the dead flower stalks, leaving stem stubble of varying height, anywhere like 8 inches up to 24, to provide these nesting cavities. She says the height differences are important because different species of bees are actually looking for different heights of stubble. So some bees are looking for something that's 8 inches tall. There's another species that's looking for something that's like 16. Something else is looking for 24. So if you cut things at different heights, again, we'll cover all of our bases. We'll cover lots of different species with that. So then that stem stubble is now standing up. There's cavities exposed, and female bees are going to find that and start their nests into it. So they're going to lay eggs. They'll provision them with pollen so that when the larvae hatch, they actually have something to eat. And I added a note off to the side: cut back once soil temperatures are over 50 degrees. I know that like native plant gardening has become sort of a thing because now there's like memes about it that randomly show up on social media. And in the springtime, I keep seeing the one about, don't cut anything back until the air temperatures have hit 50 degrees. That one, neither one of these is like super precise. But the problem with air temperatures is a problem that all Mainers know, which is that we can have a lovely string of 50-degree days in April, and then we can still get a frost, or hey, it could even snow again. So if you cut stuff back when it's just the air temperatures getting warm enough, there's a lot of emerge yet. It's too soon for them. It's going to be later. You'll wait for longer for the soil temperatures to get up to 50 degrees, but more stuff will be ready to emerge at that time. But if we're being like really super duper technical about this, one of the things that scientists found in that leaf litter study was that there wasn't really a moment when insects stopped emerging in the springtime. Those researchers, they went into that study thinking that they were going to see this like big flush of insects hatch out, and then it would kind of like taper off and stop. But what they actually saw was insects started emerging in the spring, and then it just kept going. More species just kept coming out week after week after week throughout the spring and into the summer, because there's so many different species and they're all just doing things a little bit differently. So it's okay to leave things, again, just standing the whole time. But if you must cut back, try to wait until after 50 degrees soil temperature. But again, something is still going to be it'll be a little too soon for somebody in that situation. But let's say we've done it. We've cut back those stems. The bees have come along and laid some eggs. In summertime, the new growth of that plant is just going to hide that stem stubble. Like that awkward moment doesn't last for too long. It gets hidden by all the new growth. And then that gives time for those bee larvae to just keep developing inside the hollow stem of last year's growth. Fall and winter roll around. Again, we just leave everything standing. The bees are going to overwinter in those stems as larvae, and then they'll hatch out the following spring. So that's one way you can create a little habitat, but still sort of try to keep things a little bit neater and tidier in the garden. This graphic is super easy to find online. You can take a screenshot if you're looking to save it, but if you Google like stem nesting bee habitat, Heather Holmes, Holms, you'll find this all over the place. It's readily available, and she's great about sharing all of her knowledge and her information. Yeah, so that is stem nesting bees. You can move to the next slide. That's actually all the technical information that I have planned for you all tonight. But I'm happy to stick around and answer questions for a while. And that's also my email address. And I'm happy to, I am the person who doesn't have the question immediately when the presentation is done. I'm the person who has the questions like 24 hours from now. So if that's you as well, please feel free to email me at any point. I'm happy to answer questions that way too.
I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing if everybody's okay with that, so we can chat and see each other.
Yeah. So I have a question if nobody else does.
I think go for it, Suzanne.
All right. Okay. So I learned something fun over our nice little drought of a summer is that certain grasses, since they're so broad, the blade itself is so broad that they actually are not good, especially in dry, compact, drought type soils, because the grass is so broad. So when the rain does come, it just deflects the rain right off of it. And since grasses have such short root systems, that can lead to erosion, and especially if it gets ripped out. So my question is, what kind of grasses are best? And especially how our summers might continuously to be increasingly dry and our soils will become compacted. What are some good grass?
So are you thinking about like a lawn substitute, or are you thinking about ornamental grasses, things that would like stand alone and don't need to take foot traffic?
Yeah, a lawn.
Yeah, there isn't one.
I love ornamental grasses.
Like the worst answer ever. Yeah, the thing about lawn grasses, like the typical mix of like Kentucky bluegrass and whatever else is in those lawn mixes, we have developed those over hundreds of years to be what they are, to be low growing, to be super foot traffic tolerant, to be able to play golf and baseball, and to tolerate like dog pee and everything else that we do to them. And there's not a natural naturally occurring species that has had to deal with that like kind of level of abuse. So if there are parts of your yard where like that's what's going to happen there, you're going to play baseball or soccer or hit a golf ball or let your dog run around, whatever it is, that's an okay area to keep as lawn. And then it's just about, again, adapting strategies. So it's interesting to me that you say that their root systems are short. That's not actually true. If we let, like, grasses are a cool example of like as above, so below. If we allowed those lawn grasses to grow taller, their root systems would grow proportionately longer as well. But because we keep mowing them and mowing them and mowing them, the plants never have time to actually build out their root systems. They have to stay really short because they're in this constant state of like emergency, basically, because we keep coming along and like whacking them off. So if you let the grass grow a little taller, and best practice is usually around 4 inches high for lawn grass, then the root systems will actually get proportionally longer as well. And they'll do a little bit better job of actually finding water. That being said, you know, the other thing about the lawn grasses that we grow is that they are not supposed to be green at this time of year. They are evolutionarily programmed to go dormant in the summertime. They're called cool season grasses because they're green in May and then they green up again when the weather cools off in like September, October. They're supposed to be brown and crispy and dormant in July and August and early September. There's nothing wrong with them. They're just taking a nap at the moment. So they're fine. They're coming on back. They just don't look so great right now. What happens when people like water and fertilize is that it's kind of like tricking the grass into thinking it's a nicer time of year for them. So they just stay green. That was a really long answer for a much shorter question.
I loved it. I loved it. It was fantastic. So thank you.
I like thoroughness.
Yeah.
So I have a question about leaf cover on grass. You know, the grass lawn. Doesn't leaf cover kill grass, or am I completely off base here?
No, you're right to a point. The lawn can handle a certain amount of leaves. You don't need to get every single leaf off of your lawn in order for it to be a healthy lawn. The lawn can also benefit from getting that that kind of nutrient boost through the leaves decomposing. It becomes problematic if you've got, you know, if you have one of those yards where you've got like giant oak trees or something, and you're like wading shin deep through them in the fall, that level, like if you're talking like a foot of leaves, that can start to smother the grass. Absolutely. So in that situation, you might consider like just raking early. Maybe you just rake what comes down in the next couple of weeks. And then as things get colder, you let the rest of it just go, right? So again, you're not getting as deep of a layer, but as more and more insects start to hunker down for the winter time, you're leaving them where they are. But yeah, if it's deep enough, it can definitely kill your grass, which you could use to your advantage if you wanted to kill that grass and turn it into a native plant garden in the following spring.
There you go. I've got another question. I live in a community where they take care of the lawn, so they are, you know, fanatical about getting, you know, all the leaves off the ground, and I rake it into my little garden. And would leaves on a patio, left on a patio, like a concrete patio, would they provide habitat for bugs, or does it have to be on ground?
On ground is going to be better because some of the insects are going to be in the soil below the leaves, and then some insects are in the leaves themselves. And again, this is where, like, you know, you could go get a PhD in entomology to figure out who exactly is doing what. But if you just leave the leaves on the ground, you know, you kind of have all of your bases covered. So I would say on the patio, it's better than carting away to the landfill, right? Like certainly better than that, but you're going to miss these that needed to have the nice little like blanket on top of the soil for the winter.
Gotcha. Thank you. This is just fascinating, but like really
Good.
enjoying this. But I have
Good.
a
I'm glad.
guilty that I don't even know if lamb's ears are native or not. That fuzzy plant ear.
Yeah.
Is that a native?
I actually don't know if that one's native either. That's funny. I only looked up
Oh,
that
okay.
ragweed was native presentation. I think
Okay.
when things are going to be used in like an ornamental way, I tend to not, I don't put quite, and they're also not super invasive either. Clearly, like we're not talking about Japanese knotweed here. We're something that just shows up like
No.
occasionally. Yeah. So I would call it, even if it's not native, it's definitely more in like a benign category to me. It doesn't have that same kind of, you're not going to see a giant monoculture of lamb's quarters anywhere, right?
Yeah, no, I haven't. Well, the thing that I'm guilty about now that I heard this talk is that it had long stems with flowers, and I was thinking, wow, doesn't look so good. So I cut them off, and I probably killed animal habitat. I feel
Who
terrible.
knows?
So
We can't,
next,
I know.
let's them.
Yeah. But now for next year, and there's probably plenty of other stuff that is still standing that you'll leave standing. And yeah, if this were Eco Confessionals, this could be the only programs that you guys offer, right? Would just be like a time for everyone to kind of unearth their ecological sins, and everybody sort of needs to do that. But at the same time, we just need to be able to like keep doing the work anyway, even though we all have like, some kind of like, environmental skeletons in our closets. Like, it's okay. You take the knowledge that you get and you just keep moving forward.
Thanks. That's encouraging.
So I know the summer isn't even technically over yet, but I have already started getting emails from Fedco about planning my perennials and tree orders and things like that for next year. If you could recommend a couple species that you think those of us that are, have space to put in another plant or two should consider, what would you recommend?
Oh man, there's so many different ways of answering that. There's kind of like the swing for the fences answer is, if you have room for an oak tree, plant an oak tree. If you're familiar with the work of Doug Tallamy, he's like the godfather of this movement, and he's a wonderful writer. He's a wonderful speaker, and he talks a lot about oaks because they support just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different species of insects. So if you've got the room, if you've got the capacity for a tree, go for a tree. If what you have is room for slightly smaller trees like oaks, you're looking at something that's going to be 75 feet tall one day. But if you have room for something that's maybe 25 or 30 feet tall, then some of our native cherry species also are real power players in terms of organisms that they support. So choke cherry, which is going to be Prunus virginiana. Choke cherry also supports hundreds of different insect species. And then when you get into flowering species, the big hitters are often the native sunflowers. What else? Native bee balms. There's 3 different bee balms that are great. We get real focused on milkweed, and milkweeds are super cool, but there's one species of insect that really needs milkweed for its entire life cycle, just one. There's many other critters in the world that need some support, in addition to the very beautiful monarch butterfly. So like those bee balms, a lot of different bee species are looking for bee balms. And then also like give some love to those goldenrods. They really are critical power players. There are some that are better in like garden landscapes that like I plant blue stem goldenrod. I recommend blue stem goldenrod all the time. It tends to be, it just doesn't like take over in the way that some of the other ones do. So if you're looking for kind of the nicer garden appropriate goldenrod, then yeah, look for some blue stem goldenrod. It's a really lovely option.
And sort of following on from that, are there specific places you recommend getting your plants from for really those locals?
Yeah, the enthusiasm is there, and then the sourcing is not. Like there is a real disconnect between what people want and people's ability to get it. I'm in South Portland, so my knowledge base is more southern Maine. And right now, Maine Audubon is definitely like a great go-to, and you can order online and then just arrange to pick up at Gilsland Farm. They're going to continue expanding their native plant programming and sales, and so it's just going to keep getting better and better. Are you in Portland? Did I hear that?
I am in Portland, yeah.
Okay. So you can also go to O'Donnell's out in Gorham, which also does the best job locally of carrying native plants. And then if you're okay with online shopping, there's one out of Vermont called Northeast Pollinator. I love them. The woman who founded it is a PhD entomologist, and again, like really into how native plants and insects interact, and then turned that into a native plant propagation business up in Vermont. They sell plugs. Plugs are like these little, they're usually like, yay big around and like 3 inches deep, but they'll be like $6 each or more, usually that's about the ballpark. So in terms of cost effectiveness, plugs are totally the way to go. And they're also just so easy to stick in the ground. It takes nothing. You barely even need a shovel to get them in. And so they're also, they're a great option. And they tend to have stuff that's very specific to the area. And then you can just order your plants in your pajamas and then they just show up in a box one day.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I have a quick question. I have a native plant seed mix that I'm wanting to do soon. And I don't know, if I'm trying to keep my gardens unmaintained but I'm wanting to start some new growth too. Would you suggest throwing the seed out now or doing it in the spring?
Yeah. Can I ask a little more about, like, did it come as a mix or is it individual species? I'd probably wait because right now, it's fine. They just need a period of cold. But if you just put stuff out now, you're just expanding the amount of time that other things can come along and eat those seeds and prevent them from germinating. If you wait a little while until like some of the birds have migrated or, then you can toss that down in like November, December, January, and they'll still germinate fine.
Oh, great.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Yeah, I know Wild Seed Project, if you're familiar with their work, I think they've really been trying to push people to do like more intentional sowing, like actually sowing in pots and monitoring them, because like that lovely idea of I will just broadcast some seed and it will grow doesn't always work quite as perfectly as we might want it to. So that might also be something to consider. You might have a higher success rate sowing it into pots and then transplanting stuff in the springtime. Yeah. Kat, I saw that you had your hand raised.
Yeah, I have a bit of a different, I wouldn't say problem, but system that I live on. I live on about 5 acres on the Penobscot River, and I've let a lot of my land go back to wildlife habitat.
Yeah.
There are places that I would like to keep the trees from growing up. So I was talking to my neighbor who brought me firewood, and he asked if I wanted him to bush hog my pasture.
Mm-hmm.
Now the flowers have gone by, everything's gone to seed, and he says right now is the best time to bush hog as far as running the bush hog because it's dry and everything's gone by.
Right.
And I'm like, well, but what about everything that's overwintering? I really don't want to drive a tractor across all these things that have, started hibernating. Although about 50% of my property I've let go to nature. So I can kind of assuage my guilt a little bit there that I have provided plenty of milkweed for the monarchs and all kinds of diversity and edge plants and fruit trees and sumac and all kinds of overwinter food for the birds, like winterberry and stuff. So is it the best time if we were going to keep trees from growing, or is waiting till spring better, even though it's wetter and there may be more things in the future?
There's not like a slam dunk answer in terms of timing. So here's what I would recommend. If possible, instead of mowing it all down at one time, can you sort of mentally divide it in half and have him brush hog one half this year and the other half next year? And then you just keep alternating that way. You could even divide it up into thirds and do the rotation as year 1, year 2, year 3. But it's okay to let it go between 2 and 3 years is still fine for a brush hog to come in and mow down that woody stuff. And then that way you are letting some of those wildflower plants stay standing for an entire year rather than mowing them down. So it's less about like, is it spring? Is it fall? I think you can do either one of those, but try to do this alternating strategy to let something really go through that entire cycle before it gets cut down. Does that make sense?
Oh yeah, I have no problem letting things go. Whenever you don't want me to do something, just ask, because I'll be happy not to do anything. And I don't plant grass because I have so much native plants that when I mow, I do mow high up on the highest setting for my blade. And then I wait, like I'll mow my yard probably twice a year.
Yeah.
So everything, so that, early on to mulch in the leaves and things, and after a certain amount of time has passed, like you say, when it warms up and things start after the first flowers have gone by, because that feeds the pollinators that are coming in from, migration and stuff. So usually around June, I'll make the first cut, and then about this time of year, I'll mow again. But my 35-year-old riding lawnmower stopped working again. And I know it's got something jammed in the blade or something because I use it kind of rough. And so I've already taken it in 3 times. I can't do it again, So I said, well, we just won't mow. and now, all the wildflowers are still blooming, and I don't feel guilty. So
yeah, I think that's fine. And then just an occasional stroll through to keep an eye on any sort of invasive species that might be coming in, so you can get ahead of it before.
I use a bagger mower for things like knotweed and what is that new one? It's I want to say it's always Asian. I don't know how all of these things come from Asian countries, but they must be brought in by landscapers. Nothing, no pointing fingers, but
Well, it's because like, if you just started walking like due west, if you just got on a line of latitude right now and walked due west, you're going to hit Japan. Like the climate. The climate is just similar enough to Maine that those are the invasive plants that when they get here, they do fine. Like you're never going to hear about like the Kenyan something or the Brazilian whatever, because those climates are too different. They just can't become invasive here. But generally a lot of the Asian things, like the climates are just similar enough that they do just fine.
The jet stream must contribute a lot.
Yeah. We also give as good as we get. I feel like that's always an important detail with the invasive conversation, is that Europe is chock-a-block full of American species, and like the Western lupin is all over New Zealand and Iceland, and our goldenrod is like absolutely covering most of Europe. Like it's yeah, we're not innocent, certainly.
Well, we're not guilty of that. That's nature just, growing. Whatever is growing where it's growing is
it's the nursery trade overall. It's gone, that's gone in both directions. European nurseries have imported plants from the Americas for years as well that have become invasive.
This is really interesting. I rarely get to talk gardening with people, because and it's great to see so many people interested, in doing it right. Like, don't plant grass. I mean, it's like, just let whatever grows grow and cut it, manage it. But I have wild strawberries on my lawn. I have all kinds of different foods for my dogs and my chickens, and, and don't listen to those tick fanatics. If you spray your yard with poison, you're going to end up being kind of sorry in the long run.
Yeah, wild strawberry is I use wild strawberry all the time as a ground cover. It's a pretty decent grass substitute if it doesn't get like a ton of foot traffic. Like you can't play soccer on top of wild strawberry, but if you just needed to like occasionally walk through it to get from like one part of your yard to another, wild strawberry can handle that for sure.
Yeah, it's pretty resilient. So
yep.
yeah. and lots of food for the birds and whatnot. So
Yeah, it's a heavy hitter for sure. Yeah. Cool. Anybody else have lingering questions? Suzanne totally does. I can see the look on her face. Yeah.
I always have questions, always. But I just have a quick one because I also want to be respectful of everybody's time too. We have 3 minutes left. So I do have centuries old oak trees on my property. One of my giant ones has 0 acorns this year. Do they go through, because you know how like alums like onions and chive, like especially onions, like white onions, one year they'll actually be an onion. If you let it be, next year they'll be like that super pretty firework pom-pom flower. Do
Yeah.
oak trees cycle like that?
Yeah, totally. They have mast years where they really just let go as many acorns as they possibly can. And I'm currently blanking on whether that was last year or not. I certainly had some clients who looked like they were having a mast year. You know, when it's just like it's like a carpet of acorns, when it's like ball bearings underfoot. It like that's
Yeah,
a mast
yeah.
year. And then
Very
that
much so.
energetically, that is so expensive for the tree that there's often a dip in production the next year after that because the tree is like, you know, just spent and it's trying to regroup. There's also just so many, you know, in addition to invasive plants, there's also a number of invasive insects, and oak has certainly been a target as like the brown-tail moth and winter moth have both gone for oak trees. And so it might be sort of a combination of those things that's just kind of wearing it down a little bit.
Okay. I was just wondering because it was so hot and dry.
Yeah,
Especially
and that, right? And that's like another factor too. The trees are making decisions about how to spend that energy. And
yeah.
if production is too expensive, then they're just going to focus on leaves and roots this year and hold off.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other quick questions from anyone?
Can you just remind me what insect violets use?
Oh, the fritillary butterflies. And again, I think there's 4 or 5 different kinds looking for fritillary, looking for violets in particular. And our violets, the ones in our yards, tend to be native plants. And so they're probably hosting some other insects as well. But fritillaries are usually the one that, yeah, people know the most and see the most.
Thank you.
Great. Perfect. On the button. Jane or Philip, do you have the Sierra Club's YouTube link handy dandy? We could pop into the chat at all? If not, totally fine. I should get that and make a little folder on my desktop so I can have that handy dandy. Thank you everybody for the inaugural re-energizing of the community conversations. I'm going to put my email in the chat. If you want to see a certain topic done, or if you have a presenter in mind, please do not hesitate to let me know. Reach out to me. And what is the chat? I'm so sorry.
Kelly, thank you so much. I very, very much enjoyed
Good.
it.
I'm so glad. Good.
Thank you so much
Yeah.
for
There's that. Oh, there it is. Fantastic. Thank you, Jane. So I can now find the chat.
Thank you all for coming, and thank you for your patience with our technical difficulties.
Thank you for crash course in Google Meet. I'm sure this will come in handy in the future for me.
I hope so. I hope so.
Excellent.
This was great. Thank you all very, very much. We hope to see you soon on it.
Yes. Thank you so much. Have a great night, everyone.
Good night, everyone. Thank you so much.
Good night.
All right. Okie dokies. And then, so Jane, when Corinne gets back, oh, Jane's done. Okay.